Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Labco Fitness podcast. And you guys might have noticed there's someone next to me. Who are you?
Hey guys, I'm Sebastian. I'm on the
The
website
monster.
Yeah.
He looks normal,
People say that.
but he's 6'8", 203 centimeters. I think like 130 something kilos. 133, Jesus, and it's crazy. Like, it's hard to tell because he's just really well proportioned. So like, if you just see him standing in a field, he looks like a normal person. But then his head touches the top of a doorway, and his shoulders touch the sides of the doorway. I have a picture.
It's true, actually. For the people watching the video, I'll stand up, and you come stand next to me. And yeah, he doesn't even fit in the frame. so
You're actually getting like that thing where your head looks smaller because it's so much further away from the camera.
yes, yeah. No, so Sebastian is one of the people of Labco Fitness. You know, he trains with our method, right?
Yep.
And
For quite a long time now. Yeah.
You also teach people with the method.
Yeah.
And basically, this man is he's a beast. He's a monster. And he does things you would not expect from someone his size. So that's pretty cool. And he's joining us in this podcast where we answer your questions. And you know what? Let's go ahead. Let's just do it.
I'd also say he's a pretty smart guy himself.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
He's doing some
What's your
advanced
background?
studies.
I did a human movement kinetics bachelor of science, and now I'm doing neurobiology, research master, and epigenetics.
Oh my
So
God.
after that, I want to do research in that field, regenerative medicine field. Yeah.
So a lot of stuff.
Deciding whether or not he wants to put up with med school.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an issue. But I have 2 years to think about that. So
Take your time.
Yeah, don't do it in America.
Yeah, just don't do it
I
there.
will, I will.
I can vouch for that. I have it so much better than Josh. But let's
Yeah.
not talk about that today.
Absolutely.
All right, the first question by Alexander Egebak. You know, the usual.
Yeah.
He asks, do you guys have any practical way to meet the daily protein intake recommendation of 2 grams per kilogram body weight? Well, actually, this is a very good question for this setting because we have different body weights here. I, for example, am 64 kilos, so I would have to only get 130, 140 grams of protein, which is nothing.
Not even.
Yeah, but this guy here, how much do you need?
yeah, I try to take 400 grams per day, but then I try to get the 3 grams per kilogram intake, of course.
So do you have tips for people on how to do that?
I take a lot of shakes, I guess. I take large shakes, so with breakfast, with a lunch, and also after workout. And I always do workouts like on every working day. So then I get it every working day. I get this intake, and in the weekends, yeah, then you have to be a little bit more disciplined because you don't have that routine. But yeah, so it's a lot of discipline, I guess.
All right, so mainly your protein comes from your shakes, you would say.
I try to get in every meal. I get 50 grams of protein from meat, fish, or plant protein as well. So, but then 300 grams in my shakes in total. So per shake, 100 grams, something like.
Yeah, because like if you imagine, doing any kind of advanced study, or I guess this is probably me echoing in my room, isn't it?
Well, that could be us because we're just listening to the speaker.
I don't know. No worries. I will try to eliminate my side so
Yeah.
that we can blame you.
Okay. So if you guys notice an echo in this episode, I'll try to remove it in post. But there will be a little bit of an echo because we don't have headphones for 2 people right now. But deal with it.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so I think like what's really neat about this is that you imagine if you tried to get 8 meals, because people will say, why don't you just get it all from food, bro? And it's like, well, cooking takes a while and you can make large batches, but then you have to have space to store all that stuff, or you're cooking every day, which takes a while. And if you're busy, you don't always have that time. You might have time to cook once or twice a week. And other people who are listening may have time to cook every day. And when I had time to cook every day, I cooked every day. I like that. But it's not practical. Right now, I never get to cook. Like on my off day, I get to cook some stuff. And for me, it's not worth meal prepping too much because it's hard to find the time to eat it at work. So even if I put the time in to cook it and to store it and then to bring it to work, the nature of being a doctor in a hospital, you're being asked to do more things than there's really time to do. So you're kind of always going from one place to the next, and there's really no time. And it's hard to remember, and you're already making lots of decisions. So unless you have like, a drill sergeant behind you saying, dude, stop, go eat, which basically never happens, then all of a sudden it's 4 o'clock and you haven't eaten anything since 6 a.m. And, so even if you push it and you get 3 meals, that's not even half of, what you might ideally want. And then I don't have time to work out either. So for me, like, my wife fortunately does do like, we have one of those, what are those, the Instant Pots. Listen, Instant Pots are a great invention. I really didn't want to like them, but they're fantastic. And you can make roasts and like ribs and just all kinds of stuff in really short periods of time, and like in an hour, which for, those kinds of things, that's really short for people who've actually cooked them themselves. And they're really good. They're basically the same, There are some small differences, but they're fantastic. So that's really where my meats come from. But meat's expensive and meat spoils. If you leave it out and forget about it, you can lose a lot of money. And gram for protein, almost the only thing that's as cheap as protein powder is milk. And if you try to, get your protein from just milk, Sebastian would have to drink 3 gallons a day. And you would not want to sit in the same room with him.
No. I also have
so it's all about being practical, It's
Yeah.
like the bigger you are, the more protein shakes you're going to need. If you're trying to maximize what you're doing, and you don't have to do that, but if that's the goal, then you're going to have to rely on that because it's the cheapest and it is the easiest to carry with you.
Yeah, definitely. And one tip for the people who want to keep on cooking and get most of their protein from their foods is if you're going to cook, make sure you cook for 10 people. Just cook for 10 people, and that food can last for 2-3 days in the fridge, maybe longer, sometimes a week.
Way longer, yeah.
I do a week because I don't give a... But some people kind of freak out after a week. I just eat it. And sometimes I make a very good meal. I'm like, you know what? I'll make so much that I can eat this meal 5 times the coming few days. And that really works. That really is it's the easiest way.
I've been having these tacos for the past 3 days. And it's homemade pico, which from our tomatoes and everything that we grow here. And then it's like, my wife makes a big like Instant Pot of pork shoulder because it's the cheapest meat you can buy. It's like less than $1 a pound when you get it at the right time. So we just stock up and keep it in the freezer. And, it basically has the same protein as anything else. And then just kind of put some barbecue sauce in, cook it, and then that can be frozen. We can thaw it out 1 container at a time and throw it in here, and it's absolutely delicious, It's like you probably can't see this too well, but I can lift it up for the phone. The colors won't come through very well, I don't think. But it's really fantastic, and it's something I can carry the way that she's really smart about the way she wraps it up so the juice can't leak out. And it lasts like forever. I mean, they'll easily stay good for a week and a half, 2 weeks in the fridge. So even if I forget about them, we're still okay. And it's to make your food last, pack it as soon as you've cooked it. That's
exactly.
the key
Don't leave it in a pod.
what-
Just put it in a Tupperware and put it in the fridge or in the freezer, depending on whenever you want to eat it.
Yeah, as soon as it comes off the heat, you should pack it up. And don't it doesn't need to get to room temperature. Like, you don't want to put boiling stuff, but if it's like still, 100 degrees, so like say 40 centigrade, go ahead and put it in the Tupperware. If you have decent Tupperware, that's going to be fine. Just get it in there, close it up, and just forget about it. I mean, don't forget about it forever.
Yeah, what I normally like is not to eat like 5 days the same meal. So what I do is I cook a double meal for the lunch for the next day. So I have double the vegetables, double the carbs and the meat. So I have at lunch, I have like a full dinner meal. And that way I can eat every day. I can have a different meal in the evening as well. And then of course in lunch it will be the same.
That.
But that will makes it easier to get more a variety of different nutrients and different foods. So
I do something similar. What I do is on, let's say, Monday, I cook something, and if I have time Tuesday, I'll cook another thing, and now I have two nice meals in the fridge, and I can basically be like, today this one, tomorrow that one. And you know what a cool side effect is of having so much food in your fridge? When your friends come over, there's always food at Yacht's place. Like,
Yeah, all of a sudden people know where to hang out.
actually, I sometimes I invite friends over. I'm like, man, you look malnourished. Like you haven't had enough food. Just have some food, bro. You gotta bulk. Like, yeah, it works.
Excuse me, bro. You look terrible. Why don't you come to my place and eat some damn food?
I've done that, and I don't. You know, they appreciate
That's
it.
really funny.
All right, let's move on to the next
good,
question. By Thomas Dargent. And he asks, any advice for reverse dieting? I know someone that seems to be unable to lose more than a few kilos when in a caloric deficit. Is that the solution? Now, Josh, do you know what reverse dieting is?
Yeah.
Can you
Reverse
explain?
dieting is, yeah, sure. So the concept of reverse dieting is that, you can't stay in a deficit forever or you die. I mean, basically, if you did it long enough. So sooner or later, your body figures out a way to make it equal. And that's by reducing its metabolism. And that's where weight loss comes from. So is that one of the biggest ways that it reduces metabolism is by making itself smaller. And so, and that should make basic sense. That's why you lose weight when you eat less. But your body also has the ability to adjust. And I'm not going to drown people in like the technical details of how that works. It is not the thyroid. So just throw that out. It's actually regulation of mitochondrial respiration, and that's all you need to know. The important thing to know is that just like it took time for your body to become more efficient, it sometimes takes time for some people's bodies to become less efficient. Because that's when you're less efficient, it sounds bad, but what it means is that your body's energy requirement is higher because for the amount of energy that it actually burns, it gets to use less for its bodily functions and more is lost as heat. So does that make sense? So that's probably a little over people's heads. So the key is that you want to think of it as changing gears. And it takes time to change gears. You can't just snap your fingers and make it happen. And so if you have been, especially in a large deficit, so like, 25, 30, 40%, especially, because you've been losing weight fast or you've been really trying hard or you just kept dropping the calories because your body keeps adjusting. Now, there's a limit to what it can adjust to, but sometimes that gets so low that you feel terrible when you eat that little. And that's not always practical. When you want to, so when you're trying to reverse diet, what that means is instead of just saying, well, I used to be at a deficit and starting today, I'm eating back at maintenance. It says, well, maybe I'll take a month or two to get back to maintenance, and you just make a series of steps. The super OCD way to do it is to try and make every day a little bit more. I think almost nobody can do that without losing their mind and feeling bad about themselves. It's much easier to say that, well, if I'm eating 1,600 calories a day and my maintenance is 2,400 calories, then that's an 800 calorie difference. So I can just add 100 calories per week, basically. And that way you can maintain some of the discipline, but you don't have to be as strict, and you're adding the food back in slowly. Whether you need to do that or not really depends on the person.
So reverse dieting, a method where people go from caloric deficit to maintenance, is that what it basically is? Where they basically...
No. Reverse dieting is just the period where you're returning from a deficit to normal calories.
Oh, so that's just getting back to...
Yeah.
Oh, and then do they go back
and
again?
There's no real rules for it. There's been a lot of people who have... There's not a huge amount of research, but there is enough research for us to know that a lot of people probably don't need it, but there's also enough... There are a lot of people who pay very close attention to what their bodies are doing. And, when you look at research and you see something that says, well... this probably doesn't have a meaningful effect. If you look at per person data points, what you find is that for about half of the people, there was an effect, and for the other half, there weren't. And we don't really know why these people broke out into these different groups. Or it might be a third had like a big benefit, a third had like a small benefit, and a third really actually did badly. And these are just random numbers. These, it can be any breakdown, but the way that statistics work is that when you have widely variable results, the goal is to turn that group of, like, say, 100 people into one average person and so it's really a probability thing. And what it's saying is that, there's no reason to think that for any random person that you pick, that reverse dieting would work better than just going back to maintenance. It does not mean that that's true for everybody. It just means that if you take 100 people, on average, about 50 of them will do fine either way, and the other 50 will do better with one strategy than they do with the other. And that's the easiest way to think about how to interpret stuff like that. Because there was this whole crap going around about, like, metabolic damage, and that's not, people are like somehow believed that they were just broken, and that doesn't seem to be true. There are a subset of people who, once their mitochondria becomes super efficient, which means that they need less calories to maintain their weight, which is bad in a way. It's great for survival, but it's not good for trying to lose weight, right? Because if you need less calories to maintain the same body weight, it means there's less calories left to cut, So that can get really tricky. The biggest thing we see is that you need to have resistance exercise full body. Diet alone is by far the easiest thing for people to do from a technical standpoint, because all they have to do is put things in boxes that are smaller. If you have 8 meals, putting their meals on smaller plates, but eating the same things results in a calorie deficit unless you pile it higher. So, like, if you say a quarter of my plate's this, that, and the other, and you go from a 10-inch plate to an 8-inch plate, unless you intentionally stack it higher, you just make everything that, you do it all the way that you did. There's just less that fits on the plate, so you eat less. And that's that doesn't require special equipment. What it does require is, I don't want to say willpower, because I think that really it paints the wrong picture. It makes it seem like people who fail are just lazy, and that's not true. But it can be true, but there are plenty of people where that's not true. The real issue is just that one way or the other, you have to make a deficit. And there are some people who have a really hard time getting back to their previous normal. And that's also okay. It just means that for them, the physical activity is a more important thing to make sure they don't lose. That's what I would get at. And if you're maintaining your muscle mass, your body, even if it's slow, is going to start getting rid of the even if you're capable of maintaining if you're limited to being able to tolerate a smaller deficit, as long as you're maintaining your muscle mass through exercise, you're going to be losing body fat. It might be slower than the people around you, and that's just a reality of life, but it's still something that can happen. So the key is just to figure out how to make that work. And I think we would lose people if I got into any more details.
Yeah, that's not
we
go too much.
probably already lost people. It's more like just remember, reverse dieting is, instead of immediately going from a 20% deficit back to what your previous maintenance was, is taking a month or two and saying, like, okay, each week I'm just going to increase my calories by 25% of the deficit. So if I was 600 calories down, I'm going to add like 180 calories or whatever that ends up being. And so you want to make it in chunks that are big enough to where you can't accidentally screw it up too bad. And you want to give yourself enough steps to where I would say you have at least 4 weeks. There's no magic number, but taking a couple of weeks does tend for certain people to cause less fat regain. Either way, they're going to end up at the same maintenance level either way. Whatever maintenance level they're going to return to is going to be the same no matter how they do it. But if you consume less total calories during that return to maintenance, you put on less extra fat. And for the people who go back to maintenance in like a couple of days or a week, because their body just is very flexible like that, then they'll never notice the difference. For the people who it takes longer, they're the ones who notice the difference. And you only know when you try.
All right, that's cool. That wraps it up. I
Yeah,
think
so you might want to even cut out that whole long other bit.
it's fine. That's what a podcast is about, man. You just give your answer, and then people dig what they want. For the next question, we're going to talk about Iron Cross by Daniel Manu. And he asks, for Iron Cross technique and conditioning, is it better to shorten the lever, the loop rise technique, or to use something similar to a dream machine, which is what I've shown a few times in my videos, where I basically, it's not a dream machine. Basically what it is, I have a belt around me, and I can decide how much assistance I get from that belt by using two.
He's hanging weight off of his waist.
Yes, basically is what I'm doing. So
That pulls him up instead of pulling him down.
yeah, so it's like a
So
reverse weight
he's-
belt.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's perfect. That's exactly what it is it's a reverse weight belt. A dream machine, for people who don't know, is when your hands are connected to your waist through a rope. So as your hands go down, you are pulling your own waist up. And it's something that can be fun, and it has its advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, exactly. Now for the question, so I think both techniques definitely have something to it, and it's not one or the other. I would actually use the shorter lever approach as a way to build basic strength, because what that basically does, it kind of eliminates the elbow aspect in the movement, and the elbow aspect is almost always the aspect that causes the bottleneck. You know, it's the thing that prevents you from eventually having a lot of volume. So what you could do is using that shorter lever movement as a way of building strength in that very specific range of motion. And then you could use the dream machine, or in this case, not the dream machine. You could use that as a way of learning the movement. You know, as getting
the reverse weight belt.
Yeah, the reverse weight belt thing. Yeah, we'll just
I
call
like
that.
what you said there. I think we should just keep that.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Reverse weight belt. So with that method, you basically use that as a way of learning the movement, and the other one is to condition it, basically. So it's a way of conditioning it without being bottlenecked by your elbows. Is how I would use it.
So
Well, maybe Sebastian has something.
Yeah, I tried to train to do leans into the Iron Cross, and also foot assist just for the whole range of motion. But then you take you use your foot just gently on the floor and then you lower into the full Iron Cross, and you try to get as much weight, of course, off your foot. But it's really hard to measure, of course, how much weight is off your.
You could use a weigh scale.
Your what? Sorry.
A weigh scale, just the scale on the floor.
That would be a better.
you could, but like, you know, if you're trying to keep data points and really know how much better you're getting, then you have to do it like that. But if you're just trying to make progress, just do it by like your perceived exertion, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. So what do you think of that method of his and mine? And how would you approach it?
I approach it by breaking it down into either making things easier on the lever or on the elbow or not. And what I mean by that is anything you do, whether it's the straps or the cross trainers or anything that instead of making you push at your hand, makes you push somewhere on your forearm so that it's closer to the elbow, that takes a lot of strain off. So the good thing with that is that you can do more reps with less... it makes it easier on your back muscles as well. And so you can what that does is it lets you sort of learn how to control your body in free space. So like when you're actually on the rings, you sort of start getting the feel for the balance and like how your arms are moving and things like that. The disadvantage is that it takes the pronator muscles out. And so what people don't realize is that what we're really trying to protect is the ulnar collateral ligament complex. And the only muscles that do a good job of that are the pronators. So the forearm flexors do cross the elbow joint, and they do go on at the same place as the pronator. The difference is that the pronator crosses the elbow and it goes over the vast majority of the ulnar collateral ligament complex. And most importantly, it directly supports the area that most commonly gets injured, which is that sort of anterior band. And it's just the way that things line up is that it turns out that, especially in the Iron Cross position, but this is also true for planche, that the pronator muscles are the primary protection for the elbow joint. And a lot of this data actually came from baseball pitchers. because they're trying to figure out where all these ulnar collateral ligament injuries are coming from. And long story short, after a lot of testing and looking at how things attach and figuring things out, the single best elbow strategy, other than taking your time, is to do some dedicated pronator work. And you're going to have to do some bent arm and some straight arm, because the proportion of the pronators at the wrist to the pronators at the elbow are different, and the motor pattern's different. So like, you're going to build the strength better, so to speak, or you'll probably build the mass of the muscles that you need better in something of a bent position, somewhere between like 40 and 90 degrees. You just kind of have to see where you feel it the most near the elbows. But Iron Cross is a straight arm exercise, so you also need to learn how to engage those muscles in a straight arm position, and that's why you also want to do a little bit of straight arm work. As far as like which one to use for straight, and the reason I mentioned that is that it's not something we've written an article about. Nobody ever talks about this. It's something that I've privately told people for years, because this is just how your body works. You have to know how you're put together and what protects you. Otherwise, you can't approach things safely. To learn, I think you should do what's available. I don't think that you should really worry too much about whether you need to try and find a place to make a reverse weight belt apparatus, or whether you should try and make a dream machine, or whether you should just do the strap thing. Because the straps also, they're difficult to adjust. They kind of go where they go. And it kind of puts you in the same position to where, like, yeah, maybe it's easy enough for your back, but now all of a sudden you're overloading your elbow. So like, the Iron Cross trainers are expensive. And they're bulky. They're kind of hard to carry from place to place. So everything has its advantages and its disadvantages. The way that I would look at it is that I would start in a support and just start doing wider and wider supports as to sort of do the full body weight thing. And then, if you don't have a lot of equipment, you want to keep things simple, what Sebastian's doing is a great idea. The foot support does work. And the good thing about that is that you can feel everything happening to your body. You're in full control. And if you do need to bail, your feet are already on the ground. The second thing I would say is probably, I think that the straps are more practical for most people, because it's just something that can be on the ring all the time, then they only use when they need it. You can also, without adding anything, just put your arm through the strap and grab the ring on the outside instead of the inside, so that, it automatically basically supports you in a similar place. So like, you actually put your arms through the loops, through the strap that the rings hang on. And when you do your support, you're, as you go out into that cross, it's like you added something, but you didn't. It's supporting you on the forearm. So
the nice side effect of that is you'll have nice bruises on your forearms. I love it.
Yeah, that's true. And that's the thing with both the straps and this other method, is that it can be uncomfortable, especially if you're heavier. If you're lighter, you're not going to notice, or at least I don't know. It didn't really bother me, but there are plenty of people.
I just noticed
that will
it. I just
bother.
looked. I was like, oh, okay. It's like,
Yeah,
that's
and
basically
if you
it.
care, you care, and if you don't, you don't. I think that objectively, if you had it and you could do it, that the reverse weight belt is absolutely the best way to go about it, because it's the most specific. It gives you the largest range of motion with the best overall distribution of force. So, and you're still in full control of your body position, because you are not pulling on your own body. Like a dream machine, you're always pulling on yourself, and it throws your balance off, and you don't really understand that until you get on one, and all of a sudden you say, oh, this is cool, but I also kind of like, it's just weird. And
it's
then when you
totally
get off
not
of it,
representative of, especially when you do von Gelders, or
it's a different motor pattern.
yeah, it's totally different. Yeah, because you have to pull and push in order to get. So it's basically you're maneuvering. So usually you're maneuvering around the rings. Now the rings are maneuvering around you, and so that kind of
exactly.
messes everything up. So
You can only get like 50% of your body weight off, right?
yeah, you can do that. You can add a weight belt to it. Make yourself more weighted, and then increment. But that's annoying. Like, why would you just get yourself a reverse weight belt effect?
I miss it, man. I had one in
it's
my
way
garden.
easier.
So yeah, but then we had to move out from that house, and then I'm back at just normal rings again.
Rip.
Yeah.
I also miss mine. I gotta still put it in my room.
To build one,
Yeah, so I'd just say be flexible with the approach you choose. Do what works for you and what's easy. and make sure you still do some work for the pronators. And that's really easy to find. You know, we'll do some stuff on that eventually, but just Google how to strengthen my forearm pronator, and you'll find good stuff.
So that's different from wrist curls, right? For the extensors, right?
Yeah, for the wrist, for the extensors and the flexors, those muscles are also important. So like the forearm as a whole is very important to anybody who wants to do street workout or gymnastics or anything like that. But for iron cross and for a straight arm in particular, the most important, they're all important, but the most important is to pay a little bit of extra attention to the pronator muscles. And I think that's probably why I never had problems.
Yeah, yours are big.
They were stupid big. Like that when I went to Buds, they at first like they actually it scared the doctors. They thought I had a tumor on my elbow.
Well, they weren't the only ones, man. When I was there, and this wasn't even at your prime, I was thinking, what is going on?
It's a shadow of a shadow, and like yeah, and they're still like they still stick out, but like I mean, it came out like in this loop. It was crazy, and I didn't think it was abnormal until I looked at everybody else.
Yep,
mine but I could like always nobody could turn my wrist over. Like I had big people with both hands, and I could just rotate them. I couldn't beat them at arm wrestling, but it with like I guess wrist wrestling. I don't know. I never lost. It was just a thing, and I don't know why. It was just how I was built. It's like one of the few things I was naturally like actually good at besides running.
All right, let's move on to the next question by Nicholas Masman. He asks, this was asked on the forums a while back. Sorry, I don't remember by who. And the question is, if one has GST goals only, what is the purpose of a strength cycle? From my uneducated perspective, it seems more efficient to just go master the skill and then repeat that. Are strength cycles a learning experience in macro 1, or is this something more they add? Thank you. That's a great question. That's an amazing question. And I'm going to let you handle that because I actually wonder the same sometimes. So
I think there's two ways to look at it. The best answer is that more than anything else, it is a learning experience. But it's an important learning experience because some of you are going to get way better results from the strength cycle than other people. And you need to know that. You need to know what your body responds well to. The other thing is that you can run your mass cycles with GST movements. There's nothing wrong with that. There are reasons to change things up, and a lot of that is, there's a lot of reasons for that. But you can do it that way, and I think for somebody who's really just like laser focused and has never had injuries, and is actually willing to follow the progression and not push too hard too fast, then that's fine. Everybody else is going to benefit from switching it up some. And what the strength cycle really does is it lets you see the full extent to which you have improved. And it's really what we were doing is kind of a peaking cycle in a way. And we didn't take you all the way through to a true 1 rep max because most people, you need a long time to learn movements before it's really safe to do that. But by taking you from from controlled tempo on the eccentric to learning a fast eccentric, you have to start with lighter weights because the peak forces are actually higher during those movements than they are during the heaviest part of a mass cycle. And that can cause sudden ruptures. So I made sure that this is programmed in a way that lets your body get used to that and doesn't take you too far too fast. And so there's a lot that goes in that isn't always worth explaining in super great detail. But if your goal is really explosive stuff, like if you really care about just doing like planche push-ups and going from like a planche to Maltese, then I think the whole switching between mass cycles where you're really doing mostly movement stuff, and then skill cycles where you're really more just practicing sequences and holds and whatever, and doing just enough of the other things to maintain your strength, is fine. But if you want really explosive stuff, then you do need to do stuff like what the strength cycle had, because that mass to skill approach is not going to do wonders for your explosive pull-ups, for trying to do really, really powerful muscle ups. That's a totally different motor pattern, and that's where the strength cycle comes in, because it's really kind of a bastardized power peaking. and nobody is going to put up with a true power cycle because it's the most boring thing you could ever do. It's literally like you will do not more than 4 reps and you're going to rest for like 3 to 5 minutes. And those reps are going to take like 1 second each. So your work to rest time is just absurdly large, or like the rest time to work time. So you're basically doing nothing but resting with a few explosive attempts. But that's how the most powerful athletes train their power sports, because that's the only way to ensure that you're only training your most powerful recruitment pattern. You get confusion in motor learning at very high levels. You do it for regular people, you don't. But as you start getting stronger and more powerful and you start getting close to your peak, your true peak performance for your body, if you don't start doing those things, you can never achieve your best times. You can never achieve your highest power. So it's all about where you're at. So I think that, it's something you should do the first time around. And if you felt like you got something out of it, then I would keep it in at least once a year. And if you don't, then I think you could probably take a year or two and just ignore it, not do a strength cycle, and then approach it again in a couple of years and see if you are in a different place and might benefit from it.
That's awesome, man. That was really enlightening. I think thank you for answering that question, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next one then.
I wonder how many people believe that we don't read these things ahead of time.
Yeah, people should know. Like, we really ad-lib everything.
I never know.
I saw it. There's no text. I was just asked like 5 minutes ago before the podcast. So
I literally asked him, like, you want to join us or what?
That's cool. I like it.
All right, so next question by Robert Burtchell. He says, I've seen y'all promote using the mass cycles for fat loss, and Mike Isertel talks about basic hypertrophy blocks being used for fat loss. What are your thoughts on MRT, where you can where you train in a circuit fashion, but still get roughly 2 to 3 minutes of rest between specific sets? So, for example, incline press, rows, squats, and hinge, then rest 30 to 60 seconds and repeat. How would this affect muscle growth as well in a non-fat loss phase? Would one just be able to use the correct loads for 12 to 15 / 5 to 10? So what he's basically asking is, I think, can you do a sort of mass cycle?
Is a strategy. He's asking if a time-efficient circuit training fat loss method is also appropriate for muscle growth.
And also muscle maintenance. So how is it for muscle maintenance? Let's answer that question first.
Well, maintenance you can do almost anything. How much you really need does change as you get bigger. As you get bigger and stronger, you do need more for maintenance. But we're talking about going from like 1 set a week to going to maybe like 6 to 8 per body part for somebody who's, more or less at their peak, at least for a month or two. So maintenance is just, there's not very much to it. So could you do that? So could you do that for maintenance? Probably. I think almost everybody listening to this podcast, the answer is probably yes.
What about Sebastian?
Like Olaf? I don't think so. I don't think so. Same thing with Olaf. I think they'd be fine for a couple of weeks, maybe a month. I don't think they'd be okay for half a year. I think they would lose a huge amount of strength and a considerable amount of muscle. I think they'd still carry plenty, but they would be down and they would have to recover it.
If you get to 3 grams per kilogram of protein, will it still happen then?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I think so.
It'll
happen less.
What if you maintain using this strategy, but at the same time...
I think it also... Sorry, go
but
ahead.
at the same time also, on the other days, you're doing skill training, which is pretty high intensive training. What if you have that combination? So you have maintenance with these sort of circuits, and then you have your skill cycle sessions where you do multis, planches, and stuff.
So I think that it's not even remotely close to optimal. But if somebody is not too, so the danger there is that you're trying to basically, when you do a lot of work in a short period of time with short periods of rest, and you're basically getting pretty close to failure, you're going to be causing more structural damage. And
so it's detrimental in a way.
And
for your fatigue.
Here's the thing. It's very hard. Yeah, I think that there's no question that you would start wearing down mentally. I think you would start feeling very tired. And there are times when that's desirable. If you need to be getting ready for a period in life that's going to just beat you down, like if you're trying to get into Navy SEAL training or some sort of special forces, or you think that you want to be like a frontline firefighter or something like that, then, the two things that matter is your general endurance and your ability to put up with bodily discomfort. That's really what matters. But if you're not in those situations and that's not what you're specifically preparing for, then I don't think that that should be the way that you approach your best results. The time that it's appropriate to me is when you're super busy. If you're in a situation like where I'm at and you have, or close to it, like if you're where I'm at, you don't have time, and I'm sorry, it just is what it is. I might be able to do it once a week, but if you find that, well, I can keep myself organized, I've only got 30 minutes to train, maybe 4 or 5 days a week, and that's literally it, then that's going to be the only way that you actually hit everything that you need to hit. And so if you're trying to do a lot of general full body work and make everything progress and you're not too terribly strong already, then I think it's going to work well until you get stronger, and then it will not. I mean, once you get to a certain point, you really do have to put all of your body on maintenance except for 1 or 2 split target areas, and then let yourself just focus on those. And that's true both for bodybuilding aesthetic purposes and for strength purposes. You really have to start shifting your emphasis in a periodized way. So you spend 2 months on planche, and then you maintain it while you spend 2 months on your front lever, and then you maintain it while you spend 2 months on your iron cross or whatever. And that's just the reality of being human as you get stronger. So it's kind of a hard one to answer because you get pigeonholed real easy, and people say, oh, this dumbass thinks that you can just do a bunch of light sets and be like CT Fletcher or something, and that's not true.
No, yeah, makes sense. All right, let's move on to the next question. This one is about drugs, I think. By Boss Batman. He says, I've read the World Anti-Doping Association, and many countries now permit the use of CBD oil. What are the pros and cons of using this substance, and do you recommend it for fitness athletes who seek the alleged benefits for muscle recovery, inflammation, minor pain management, etc.?
All right. First, the potential liabilities is that what people don't know is that CBD products are typically unregulated, which means that there's very little quality control. So you're depending on what the company tells you. That's not a reason not to buy it. That's a reason to understand that you need to be careful about your source. The second thing to understand is that CBD is not a stable compound. It does break down into THC. And so you can buy a product that's 100% or 99% or whatever CBD, and if it stays that way, and it's been stabilized properly, which will involve chemical additives for the crunchy, people who just got pissed off at me calling them crunchy, but the people who just don't want any chemicals, even though air is a chemical, there's, I am putting multiple jabs and a right cross at them together, but at the same time, there's also truth that there are some additives that you probably don't want putting in your body, but you're not really going to find those in meaningful quantities anyway. But the point is that it's not stable. It will turn into THC. There are plenty of people who have popped positive on drug tests because they were taking a CBD product and they never got high. And there's enough THC in that product after a couple of weeks of sitting in their cabinet that they are now able to pop positive on a marijuana screen on a urine drug test. And depending on what country you live in and what state you live in, that may not matter very much, or it could cost you your career. So you just need to know the risks of popping positive for THC. If you own your own business, then who gives a shit? But if you're working for the government, you'd better not do that.
Unless you're from the Netherlands.
Yeah, and like I said, in America,
America's like,
is what it is.
Yeah. We're like, yeah, sure,
but
bro.
and then at the same time, there's limited research on the true effects of CBD, and there's really nothing on long-term effects. So from a evidence-based standpoint, we really can't say anything very strongly. What we do know is that there are a lot of people who find that it works really well for them. In chronic pain clinics, I have personally talked to plenty of people who have had really, really great results with that and have been able to kind of, just with like topical CBD stuff, to basically almost stop using their opioids, which is fantastic. That's what we want. At the same time, there are other people who have used the exact same product and have gotten absolutely nothing out of it. And we don't know if that's a biological difference between individuals or whether there's a difference in the pathology of, which is a fancy way of saying the reason for their pain. We don't really know that much about pain still. So there's there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts. To address the inflammation thing, that's a really touchy subject that's tricky to, I think, approach right, because without any inflammation, you die and you do not adapt to exercise and you lose your strength and you lose your muscle mass. With too much inflammation, which never happens unless you beat the fucking shit out of yourself as a young person, or you have a weird autoimmune disease or something, then yes, you could have some undesirable effects. You could have accelerated tissue breakdown and things like that, and some fibrosis and whatever. But that's not going to happen to normal people, period. What is true is that as you get up into the senior citizen age range, you do see that they tend to benefit from a small extra dose of anti-inflammatories before workouts. So as we get older, and the reason for that is that older people, as we get older and we get into our 60s, certainly, we don't really know, we don't have like good age stratification on this, but we do know that as we get into our 60s, our bodies do have, it takes longer to get the initial inflammatory response under control, and it's not as tightly regulated. And that means that there's an increased chance of having more than the necessary amount of or exposure to those inflammatory signals, which basically just means that you have more damage than you need to have, and that gets in the way. The reason that young people get bad results with anti-inflammatories in terms of strength and muscle gain is that we're already basically where we need to be for optimal response. So anything that we do to disturb that puts us in a bad place. But as we get older, there is a point at which it does seem like there's research that's looked at mid-60s people, and this is not a prescription. I'm just talking about research here, that a 200 milligram ibuprofen actually does make a noticeable improvement in response to resistance training, because they are not getting they're having more of, they return from an exaggerated inflammatory state to a youthful inflammatory state. And that's a very low dose. That's like a one-time dose. That's not 3 times a day. That's literally like an hour before the workout. So that's just like, or maybe it was right at the beginning or whatever. It's been years since I've read about that. And we keep finding this to be true. So is there a place for it at some point? Yes. Is it for almost anybody who's listening to this podcast? No. Is CBD like the only way to do it? No. Might it be helpful? Absolutely. So I think that as long as it's not going to harm your career, there's no harm in trying it. But people do get psychotropic effects from it. People do feel funky. Some people do see things. And, we don't know whether it's breakdown products from the CBD turning into other cannabinoids, or whether there's just something different about those people, or whether that product was tainted. We don't really have those answers. So there's a lot of questions. I think it's worth trying if it doesn't cost you your job, and I wouldn't mess with it if you're not over the age of 40. That's just my personal opinion, at least not for those purposes. If you're a professional athlete and there's millions of dollars on the line and you just need to feel good enough to perform, even though you might not necessarily be at your best, or you're just doing too much, and there's no way to not do too much, like you're not a normal person who has choices, then those are different situations, and you should probably be talking to some specialists about that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. We had a little...
Back.
Yeah, we're back. We had a little bit of technical issues. I don't know what happened, but hey, we're back. And we're ready for...
My power cord, I was showing them my little greenhouse on the side of my room, and it worked the power cord out the side of the computer a little bit. And it didn't really give me much of any warning.
I see what happened. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, the
Yeah.
last question of this podcast by Ji Yoon Lee. He asks, I want to have perfect overhead mobility for overhead press / handstand. Doing the stretches in the routine helped initially, and I've improved my mobility from when I started. But I feel like I'm stuck and I haven't made any progress for months. At best right now, I can do wall extensions and move my arms around 20-30 degrees from the right angle starting position. And he kind of portrays that in letters and form. Do you know how? I don't know.
I think what he means is when he has his back to the wall, that he can get from here to about here before his arms come off the wall. But he can't get all the way to here.
And then he says, how do I
Right.
assess which muscle is holding me back and improve it faster?
Oh, it's not that. That's not how it's working. This is an overall motor pattern. It also, not everybody can do that. Like, you know, we all have this weird idea that everybody can do everything everybody else can do exactly how they do it if they just knew that one trick. And that's what everybody sells you bullshit with. I think that out of all the joints in the body, the shoulder is the one where you're the most likely to come the closest to being able to do what other people that you see can do, but there's still a lot of differences. Without getting into too much detail, some of us are just tighter than others, and that's a natural thing. And we tend to be the people who are higher power individuals, like we produce higher forces for the same strength, which may sound weird to people, but at very fast movements, when you're a stiffer individual and your tissues are built stiffer, you have a faster transfer of force, and that translates into a higher peak momentary power. So the acceleration works better because there's less of a stretch during that buildup.
So that explains why I'm so explosive and so stiff, and he's so weak.
No, there are some people like that, and most of us are somewhere in the middle. But a lot of it is just that, so you've learned through years and years and sometimes decades of doing things a particular way, your body has learned that when your arms get to a certain point, it arches the back, or it does other things, or when you get up, it rolls the shoulders forward when it shouldn't. And so the biggest thing is that if you're thinking about your shoulders, then you're going to be holding yourself back. What I've found to be the most helpful is to basically just think about your hands and nothing else, and where you want them to go. And yeah. And it's hard, doing this by yourself is very difficult. There's a reason why everybody who is not inherently gifted seems to require in-person help at some point in time. And it's because you need somebody to help you move into a place that you don't know how to get to on your own. Once you've felt things a few times, you can often really make it something that you can return to, but trying to achieve it that first time can be very tricky. So my best advice would be that you need to figure out if there is, under what circumstances you are able to move into the position you want to be. So, for example, you might not be doing super well with the wall slide, but you might do a great job and have super duper open shoulders that are exactly in the position that you want when you are doing a chin tucked hang from a pull-up bar. So in that position, it's not that you're not flexible or that you can't get there. It's just that your body doesn't know how to control it. So what I do with stuff like that is I get myself into that position and feel where I'm at. And then instead of hanging from the bar, I want to maintain that, get my feet on the ground and start pushing against the bar so that I'm able to go from a hang where I'm in the position that I want to be in into a press. So I think that Yad and Sebastian may have temporarily cut out.
Yeah, it's fine.
There.
Just keep going. We'll just pretend.
Yeah. The recap is that the way that you want to think about this is this a limitation in anything and everything, or is it just limited to wall slides and open chain movements or presses? So what I mean is that the first thing you want to do is do like a chin tucked hang where you're curling your chin down and you're hanging from the pull-up bar in like a tuck position or whatever, and see like, okay, am I able to move into a more open position? Am I in a position to where if I was against a wall, my arms would be against the wall? Because if you are, then your body can get there. So now you've identified something. You've identified that the range of motion is possible for you without injury.
I mean, that's passively though. Does that make?
Doesn't matter. It's a start. If you can get there passively, it's a question of learning how to get there actively. See what I'm saying? And so the way that I approach that bridge is that if you're not going to be able to have anybody help you, which is by far the best thing you could do, and unless they're an idiot, I mean, there's, and it's, if they don't really know how to help you, then another person won't help. But the right people can really make a world of difference in just a few minutes. But they can be hard to find. So one of the things that I do with this particular issue is I start with the hang, and then I have you straighten your legs without losing that hang. Sometimes you need somebody to hold your body in place so that you can straighten your legs without losing position, and just practice that. Because what we're doing is we're teaching your body, well, how do I keep this shoulder position with a different set of proprioceptive inputs? How do I maintain this activation while my body changes its position in space? And so you want to get into a point to where first your feet are on the ground while you're in this position, and then you stay there and you start pushing up instead of hanging down. That turns it into the press. And then from there, you start doing that basically like in a position to where you can start moving up and down in that position on your own. And then all of a sudden, what you realize is you're like, oh, wow, this feels like something totally alien, but it actually works now.
That's genius, man.
And then it takes all... That's how I've always done it. Yeah, I've never seen anybody do that. But to me, you start with the place that you can achieve it, and then you transition that into the place that you couldn't.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You just
the
do
moment,
it real simple.
the moment you mentioned the hanging, I was like, "What if we do this?" And then you literally said what I was thinking. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh shit, that's awesome!" Yeah.
Yeah, it's the easiest way to think of this stuff. It's just and that's kind of like it's the medicine mind. It's that is what we're seeing really what we're seeing, or not? So you have a symptom, but that doesn't mean it's the disease.
Yeah, it's not the cause.
I need to be sure that, I need to be able to figure out where this is coming from, and I do that by ruling things out one by one. And the most common thing for a shoulder especially is movement pattern, because it's such a mobile joint. The only place it's attached to another bone is where the collarbone meets the sternum. That's it. Everything else floats in space.
It's kind of creepy how weird the shoulder joint is. It's like, how are you there? How are you not at my stomach
bizarre.
or at my back? It's bizarre. It's like, holy crap.
Yeah, and then the thing is that it's almost the exact opposite with the hips.
Yeah,
is
it's
that,
stuck,
but the
that
same
one.
concept actually applies. Yeah, the pelvis is not mobile. And the socket is so much deeper, and the orientation can be so different from person to person. The femoral bone can be so different from person to person. It can even be different from one side to the other. And so you really got a lot of things that you have to think about with hips. But the nice thing about hips is that because it is so immobile, if you know what you're doing, it's really easy to use a hip scour test to figure out where this individual's passive range of motion ends. Because you can't do more than passive range of motion. Like, people make the mistake of thinking, oh, well, if I kick, I can actually get higher up than when I do a passive stretch. So therefore, active motion must sometimes be able to be greater than passive motion. But I'm talking about the anatomical limitation. You know what I mean? I'm talking about where
Bones
bone
hit
meets,
bones.
basically where... Yeah, it's more like, where's the femoral bone start? Basically, where does the hip socket get to a position to where either the capsule or the bone or the cartilage starts impacting the hip labrum? And at that point, you've basically run into your end range of motion, and then you have to play around and say, well, can this increase with different hip rotation, or are we just kind of at our limit here? And this is, Yeah, because the thing is that if you have a limitation in hip flexion, you typically have an advantage in hip extension, and that's actually true of all high-level sprinters, is that their hips point more down, so they can exert force behind them in a way that somebody who can naturally just put their stomach to their thighs can never do. And even if they have the exact same like body proportions and the exact same muscle fiber distribution and everything is otherwise identical, that difference in the hips means that one person will always beat the other person. And those are the little things that you cannot change about your body, but if you know what you're looking for, if you actually know how people are put together and what the variations can be at a very basic level, you don't need to have all the shit in your head that I have. All you need, and I don't need to have all the shit that people who know more have, you know, because I can ask them. I can pay for a consult and say, look, I've run into a unique case here and I'm not sure what I should do next. That's what experts are for. That's why you know, but in order to know when you need them, you need some basic knowledge, and knowing how hips are put together and how to test for the true like anatomical limitations and how that's different from the shoulder. The only difference is that the shoulder is a hell of a lot more mobile, so it's very unlikely that a normal range of motion is inaccessible to somebody. You know, it could be true. They could have something really different. You know, they could have a super hooked acromion. There could be a bone spur in there. They could have a tissue band that's unique to them. I mean, there are things that could be there, but that's super abnormal, and it's not what you should be looking for first.
Yeah, man. Okay, cool. That was a great answer to the question by Ji Yoon Lee, and that was also the conclusion of the questions asked in his podcast. So I want to thank you, Josh, for answering those questions with us. I want to thank Sebastian for being part of this podcast.
Glad to be here, man. Yeah.
How's your voice?
Yeah, it's good seeing you again.
Voice is gone.
It's like I haven't seen Sivas since, I don't know, since I was in the Netherlands, I think. I'm not sure if we've even have we video chatted since then? Maybe once or twice.
One time we talked about training approach, but that was like a year ago, I guess. Maybe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was fun, man, guys.
It was
as
good.
usual. Keep
what?
You go first.
I'm actually curious. Does Sibas have any thoughts, or like, does he have questions, or like, you know, we don't always get to like hang out, so I'm just kind of curious. You know, like just what's running through your head? Like, what are questions that you have that have come up during this podcast?
Yeah, maybe
or insights, like
maybe about because I was training for a lot of different skills at the same time, and then I hit like a plateau a little bit. So what are your thoughts on, like, for example, training front lever, planche? They go well together, I guess, but also iron cross, and what did I do?
One arm handstands.
Yeah, one arm handstands, but I use them more for more before the other stuff as a mobility part. But I think the combination of front lever, planche, and iron cross, because I have to grind a lot, of course, for a lot of years before I can do them all. So should I pause sometimes the iron cross and do some focus more on planche and front lever, or can I do all at the same time? I've not found a balance yet.
I think you can do, you know, a certain amount of all of them, but I do think that you're going to be in a position to where, so iron cross and front lever are more similar than iron cross and planche, because the lats are heavily involved in both. The pecs aren't as much. They're still there. I mean, everything works a lot in iron cross. You know, but you do have some unique muscular contributions there as well, some smaller stuff in the armpit, like coracobrachialis and all that. But I think that trying to work on front lever really hard and iron cross really hard is more likely to stall things out than it is if you were trying to work on planche really hard and iron cross really hard. And you know what I mean? Because if you think about it, like, even the stress on the elbow is very different. Like, yes, they're technically both straight arm exercises, but one is like pushing your elbow this way and the other is pushing it this way, or technically more like this way. So I think for a lot of reasons, you probably could tolerate both of those reasonably well. And then, yeah. And that's the thing, is it's like, what, especially, when you're in your, like certain points of this research masters, and when you have less time available, I think that you probably just want to warm up a little bit with two of those three and really focus your time on just one. And I would probably pick at least a month long period where you just keep the same focus and then swap it up, because you'll be able to maintain the vast majority of the progress you've made. You won't be able to maintain like all of it necessarily, but you're still going to be way ahead of where you were, and so you can still make progress. Right, exactly. Yeah, and the thing is, like, because you can just warm up with just a support and then just go wider and just hold it there for 10 seconds or 5 seconds or whatever's comfortable, and you really won't lose much of anything. I mean, you'll lose a little bit of the coordination because you're not practicing it as much, but that doesn't matter. That's stuff that you pick up pretty quickly. And you know what I mean? While you're still leaving the energy that you need to get the other things moving forward. Yeah. Yeah. It is, absolutely. And that's something, yeah. There's a lot of people who talk about this differently. And I think the bottom line is that the biggest thing that gets in the way of highly motivated people is doing too much. That's really what it comes down to. And that it's okay to not make progress everywhere. Nobody can. Even like professional gymnasts can't. They spend like months working on just like a Diamondov or whatever on parallel bars and maintaining everything else, because it's like, they've been doing this for how many years now? Like 15 or something, 10. And you just put that in perspective, and like, every year they're just really working on a couple of things. And are they doing everything else? Sure, absolutely. But a lot of it as a warm up. It's just as a little bit of skill practice. It's not the focus. And, you see that in kind of everything, is that, yeah, you kind of have to maintain it. But as one thing gets replaced by another, you really do just kind of permanently stay behind in that area because it's not necessary for you anymore. You've moved on to other things. Trying to literally do everything all the time is the best way to go nowhere. And it's this kind of thing, we've all found that out in our own way. I've definitely done it myself, and it's funny, looking back, I can see where that probably held me back when I was younger. Like I'm really honestly surprised that I was able to do a lot of the stuff that I was able to do, given the way that I approached things. Just because I didn't give myself the opportunity to kind of like specialize for a couple of months in just one or two things. Like, I didn't, you know what I mean? I was always doing like the rows and the pull-ups and stuff like that. And I'm not really sure why I was able to do so many pull-ups with like 120 pounds. But it just, I don't know, but I feel like I could have done more if I had just stopped doing rows for a couple of months and just worked on that and not really done hardly any bicep curls and just really kind of backed off on the other things. Just as an example, just like with bench, I never had a super great bench. As a 100-kilo guy, benching like 100 and I'm trying to think, like, I guess it would be 150-ish kilos. Or maybe a little bit more, but not much. That's not super impressive. Like, it's good. It's not terrible, but that's not going to impress anybody who's, who knows what people at 100 kilos are bench pressing. Even guys my size, who are good, are bench pressing like well over 200 kilos. And, maybe I'm not built super great for it, but I had stupid strong triceps and I had stupid strong pecs. So I think it was just I didn't know what the F I was doing. And really, I had terrible form. I didn't know anything.
A bit of luck and work.
Yeah, it was one of those things I never got taught on. And I never just gave myself time and said, maybe if I just stop deadlifting and squatting as much as I do and like just do like, 2 or 3 sets a week instead of doing the things that I'm typically doing. Maybe if I stop running for an hour a day at like 6 miles or at 10 miles an hour or something, because I was running 6-minute miles for an hour at a time, like 5 days a week. And, there's a lot of things I could have done to let myself do better, but I didn't know. I was in my mid-20s. Like, I didn't know shit, I was just pushing. I wanted to go back to buds. I didn't know that my arm was as screwed up as it was. And, it's just I didn't know where life was going to take me. And I certainly didn't know anywhere near enough about how to back off in most areas so I could make progress in the one that mattered, And that's the key, is like, you don't lose anything.
No, that's I should say to myself more often. I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something.
Yeah,
that, like I was with Leo the other day in the gym, and he was talking about, well, I used to be stronger. I was like, yeah, well, you were doing a strength cycle, dude. Like, of course you were stronger at pull-ups and everything. And I kind of the knowledge, how I explained it is, what you're doing is your cap is still there. It's still high. And when you're doing basic strength, you bring the cap higher. But the cap is still there. You're just not able to express that strength to get to that cap.
Right.
But that doesn't matter.
Right.
That's not important. As long as you're moving that cap, it means the potential expression of your strength is just much higher. And so you're making progress that you're not seeing yet. Yeah. But it is there.
Right.
Trust me. Like, for example, I did
well, it's like I guarantee you that the last time he was at whatever week he's in and whatever cycle he's in, he's stronger now than he was then. And that's what you have to look at. You cannot compare apples to oranges, so to speak. You have to say, where was I at the last time I started a planned specialization cycle?
Exactly. It needs to be
how much progress and then what did I do at the 6th week of that? And then I'm starting at week 1. How does my week 1 this time compare to my week 1 last time? Oh, well, I'm better. So obviously I've made progress and I've maintained some. I may not. Yeah, and then your week 6 is going to be further than the last week 6.
No, he would have to go to
And
strength
that's the
cycle
thing.
again and then check at that exact moment how he performs now
Right, for that.
in relationship
that's
to
what I'm
the
saying.
other. And so, for example, my PR one on pull-ups is 7. All right. Now this was done with no
Right.
specific training. I just literally hopped on the bar and did 7 one on pull-ups in a mass cycle. Right. I've got injured. Like for the past 6 months, I've had to stay away from pulling work. And a few days ago, I just did 4 one on pull-ups, and it felt like 5 reps in reserve. It literally felt like, that was so freaking light. So now, if I would specialize in one on pull-ups, I'm so certain I can get 10 reps. And it's like, I know that even though you see only 4 reps, I know there's 10 in me. Like if I specialize for a little bit, if I just do that, if I want to,
Right.
bro, I'm gonna get 10 easy. I might even have to start on weighted one arm pull-ups. Like, it's getting to that point. It's getting, and it's just
Jesus.
you gotta know, you eventually you learn how strong you are without having to express it. You're like, I know
Right.
now. If I practice full planche for a bit, I'll get that 10 seconds easy. I'll probably Maltese, and I might have a good chance of Gelder. Like even though I haven't expressed any of these movements, I know it's there. So now I'm in the process of doing that slowly, expressing it, and kind of exploring where my strength is. But it's good to know that cap thing, you're moving the cap, and you're not always at your cap. You're rarely peaked and at that point,
Right.
and that's fine. You don't need to be there, but you need to be pushing that cap further and further. That's training.
Right.
That's basically it.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
I guess that's your wife.
Yeah, I guess.
All right, I think that's a good moment to wrap this up. Sebastian, again, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah, man. Thanks for having us over at your place.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. We're going to have a workout after this.
Yeah.
And guys,
Awesome. We'll have
remember,
fun.
send in your questions. We will answer them, and we enjoy doing that. So, later.
Yeah, everybody, it's been a real pleasure as always, and thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. See you.
See you, boss.
See you guys.
See ya. Bye.
See you, buddy.